Okay. I was told you want to hear a little bit about how we do Hafrashas Challah commercially, or in at a hashkacha, which I will. I'll talk to you about that. I was told you have questions and answers. Unfortunately, the questions that someone sent me beforehand went to my junk mail, and I just found them now. So you can either ask me questions live, or I can look at that paper and do them live if you'd rather. You tell me which you'd rather. Tell me what you want to do. And also, please interrupt me and ask me questions along the way, so I don't have to just keep on talking. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and I can do more or less depending on, again, as you want. In a commercial setting, the way I see it, there are 4 ways that Hafrashas Challah is done. Excuse me, there are 4 ways that it's done. One is in a traditional way, which is somebody's there when they bake, and they take a piece of dough off, and they do Hafrashas Challah like you do in your own house. That's the simplest way to do it. It's the least common as well. That's most likely to happen like in a little bakery that is run by a Shomer Shabbos, and he takes care of it. And the next step is something we call the dough ball method, and that is baking happens in like a retail bakery. Baking happens in the middle of the night. There's often no Shomer Shabbos there at that time. So what happens is one of the people at the bakery, every time they make a batch of dough, he takes off a little piece and puts it on the side. So if tonight they're going to make 8 batches of different kinds of things, in the morning there'll be 8 little pieces of dough sitting there that he took off from each one of them, and then comes around in the morning, the Mashiach comes, or the Shomer Shabbos person comes, and he's Hafrashas Challah using that dough that was separated. That's the second method. The third method is to use Tevel. This is used more in commercial settings. And that is to say is that somebody makes Tevel, either a batch of Tevel matzah or Tevel dough. We could talk about more about that later. He makes dough that needs Hafrashas Challah, but he's not Hafrashas Challah from it. And then someone remotely says, every day someone says, whatever dough they're going to make today, whatever they're going to bake, I want a little piece of that dough of the Tevel that I have there to work as some hafrashah should happen from there. So I want the hafrashah to happen from that piece over there. So if my piece of Tevel has enough to make 100 hafrashahs or 1,000 hafrashahs, then I keep some kind of a track of how much I'm doing, and I'm hafrash each day a little bit from from that Tevel that I left behind. And the last idea is that there are some people who will say that you only have an Hafrashas Challah if the dough is owned by a yid at the time when they mix the flour and water together. And so what they do is they say, we're going to avoid the problem. We're going to do a mechira so that the dough does not belong to a yid at that time. We sell it to someone who's not Jewish, and therefore, since someone who's not Jewish owns it at the time of the Lisha, therefore there's no chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah. So those are the 4 ways that I'm aware of that Hafrashas Challah is done by hashkachas, etc. If you would like, I'm going to talk about 2 of those methods. But first, I'm going to pause if you have any questions before I get into more details. Good. Okay. So now, the method that at least I call the dough ball method, which is they separate little pieces of dough. It most commonly happens like in a retail bakery where they're just making a couple batches every night and there's nobody there, but come the morning someone can be there. So there's a specific detail about that, which is that the din says in Siman Shilchov Gimel that when you're Hafrashas Challah, you need to have shiyarehah nikarim. You need to have something left over. You can't be mafresh of the entire batch and give it as challah. And therefore, when you're, the din comes from the fact that we know the din is, the Gemara says, you could be, a person can, in Chutz La'aretz, a person is allowed to eat the bread or the cake without being Hafrashas Challah, and eventually be Hafrashas Challah, Hafrashah later on. That's the din. You're allowed to be Hafrashah. But so the diak is, why does it say V'achikach Hafrashah? Why does it say V'achikach and give it to the kohen? Achikach here was you consider it to be Challah, and that teaches us that even when you later on when you do the hafrashah, you have to do a hafrashah. You have to separate Tevel from Kulin in a way that's shiyarehah nikarim. The Malchut is Rishonim of what exactly that means to be shiyarehah nikarim. But the way it seems from the Shulchan Aruch, it just needs to be, there has to be some that's left over. You can't get everything for challah. You have to leave, some things have to be not challah, some things have to be chulin. So if the person ate up all the bread until now, at the end of Shabbos, only has one little piece left, and he'd be mafresh that whole thing as truma, as challah, truma, then that would be not shiyarehah nikarim. Okay? So that's what the person needs to do. You have to have shiyarehah nikarim. So because of that din, there's a practice that people have that when they do these dough balls, they put all, again, I told you, in the case I gave you, in the morning there are going to be 8 pieces of dough there. The person who does the hafrashah, the Shem Shabbos who comes to do the hafrashah, takes part of them and does them, says, I'm being mafresh. From each of the 8 pieces, he takes one part of them and says, this is hafrashah for that piece. Okay? And it's a question whether that's really required, whether that's the requirement or that's just someone doing because they don't really realize what they're doing. And what I mean is like this. The reason why you have the reason why in the case of the Gemara you need to do shiyarehah nikarim, you have to leave something behind, is because when you already ate up all of the food. The common case is it was Shabbos and you couldn't do hafrashah, so you ate up all the bread. You ate up all the bread, and now it comes after Shabbos. Let me turn that off. I don't know how to turn that off. Okay, sorry. Now comes after Shabbos, and the person needs to do the hafrashah. There's just a little bit left. But in the case of our bakery, think about what happened. On today's Wednesday, so Wednesday night, they sat there and they prepared all kinds. They 8 different batches of cakes and breads and things like that, and they left 8 pieces behind. Comes the morning, the Shem Shabbos person comes in, and he has 8 pieces there. So if he would take all those pieces and make them to be challah, would there be shiyarehah nikarim? Of course it's going to be shiyarehah nikarim. Because if you walk out into the bakery, there's piles of bread and cake that are there. So he's not being mafresh everything. There's plenty left behind, but he's not being mafresh. So seemingly, you don't need to have a shiyarehah nikarim. You don't have to do something special. You don't have to say part of the dough is challah, part of it is not challah. In fact, that's what people do. They say part is challah and part is not, because the Shulchan Aruch says that you're supposed to do that. You have to have leave a piece behind, but I'm not convinced that that's really required. It's hard for me to hear. You could come a little closer to the mic. You could talk up a little bit, please.
Maybe they're just concerned that it gets delayed, and then people and something will get eaten up before they're not the color.
Right. So it could happen, but let's bear in mind we're talking about a commercial bakery. They didn't make 3 muffins out of this thing. They made 20 pounds of cake, or they made loaves and loaves of challah. So you think it's all going to be eaten up before the mashgiach shows up in the morning? So I guess it could happen, but it's really unlikely. I mean, what if they take all these donuts, and they send them off to one shul for eating after davening? You think every bit is eaten up? It's hard to believe. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's the reason why. But in fact, that's what people do. I'm not sure you have to. I'll mention from the hashgacha perspective, there's a little bit of a sort of taking our chances over here, which is we come in the morning, and there's 8 pieces of dough there. Now, the assumption, of course, is that the person, the Shem Shabbos who comes here, the mashgiach who comes here to check on that, knows what happened during the night. So when he sees 8 pieces over there, he at least knows that they actually made 8 doughs during the night. He says, I know the schedule, what they were supposed to make, and they were supposed to make 2 batches of regular, and 1 batch of whole wheat, and 1 batch with oats, and he sees in front of him all those pieces in front of him. We hope that he's at least paying attention that much, that he knows how much they were supposed to make, or how much they did make, and he can compare that to what he finds when he shows up in the morning. Let's hope he's doing that. But it's not foolproof that it's really happening. What happens if they don't remember to do those pieces? Oh my gosh, the rabbi's coming, we need 8 pieces. Could someone just put 8 pieces down? Could be he would. So, great, it's not. There's again like a hashgacha type question. Is the person? Are we really sure? That the person's gonna get it right? Okay, but there's another angle of it.
There's no requirement to have a commitment to something in order that there should be the notice to the people that they actually took it from those when they send it.
So again, it's hard for me to hear. It's hard for me to hear, but it sounded like the question was, is there not a yotzev nichnas to make sure that they're always doing this correctly? So usually, it's probably not. Usually in a bakery, if you think about it, it's an all-kosher bakery. In the middle of the night, they're sitting and making breads and cookies. It's probably not yet nechnas at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe yes, maybe not.
What kind of nemanis do they have?
So again, as far as the hafrashah thought, that's my point. Is that that's what I'm headed to. Is that we're counting on, if we know they made 8 batches of dough overnight, and we know there's 8 pieces in the morning, we're sort of counting on, well, these pieces must come from there. It's not so clear that that's partial. They have to do that because who knows? Maybe they just put 8 pieces in the morning. But on the other hand, there's a side that says, come on, every day they do this, and every day there's the same number of pieces. Practices are doing what they're supposed to. So, but it's a question. It's not so clear that it's so obvious that you're allowed to rely on them in that kind of a case. I mentioned also that because this is being done in Chutz La'aretz, at least we're in Chutz La'aretz, there's no chiyuv to do it in a mukaf, so that's okay. The fact that the hafrashah happens in this little piece, the shalom in a mukaf, is okay. Chal Chutz La'aretz doesn't have to be in a mukaf. But there's a little question over here about whether we really should trust them or not. Okay, but it's very common to do this in retail. It's not just a bakery, a pizza shop also. Pizza shops are not the same because they don't tend to make their doughs in the middle of the night. They're baking during the daytime when someone could be there. It's more in a bakery where they do it overnight, but it can be in a pizza shop also. Pizza shops also that they they prepare. There's no Shem Shabbos, maybe there. Maybe, I'm going to go back to what someone said before about Yotze V'Nechnas. It's hard to be Yotze V'Nechnas and catch somebody. I guess if you walked in and it was halfway through the night and there were no pieces left, you'd say, come on, we caught you, you forgot to put a piece out. But it's hard to catch a dough and you say, oh, you just didn't put the piece out yet, I guess you did catch something, Okay, that's for the dough ball. Anybody have more questions on that before I move on to the other way of doing it? Can you, a little louder, please? I'm sorry.
That's the actual hafrashah from the actual dough.
Yes. So they take the person that's what's supposed to. There's a piece of dough out, and now that when you show up in the morning, there's a bunch of little pieces of dough there, and that's the hafrashah for the stuff that was made.
What do they do with the bracha in that case?
Why can't you make a bracha? Yeah, the guy just put a piece of dough inside. He's not being Hafrashas Challah. What does he know? He's not doing the hafrashah. He's physically separating a piece out, but he's not doing the hafrashah. The Shem Shabbos is doing. That person is doing the hafrashah when he does it in the morning. Whenever when he does it, that's when he does it. Okay, now the other system, which is used more commercially, is I mentioned that you can make Tevel. You create a batch of Tevel, and either you leave it as dough or you bake it into, let's say, a matzah or some kind of cracker. And that Tevel sits in the bakery. This is used commercially. The bakery is 1,000 miles away from the closest person, Shem Shabbos. So there's nobody there to do hafrashah all the time. There isn't even someone to come in the morning to do hafrashah. So we have to find some way to do hafrashah remotely. Okay, so this system was made to do hafrashah remotely. You create Tevel. You leave Tevel, something that's high in the challah. You leave it there in the bakery, and then someone from far away, someone sitting in his pajamas, gets up and says, everything that's going to be made today, I want a piece of that Tevel to be challah for the dough that they're making that day. So there's a lot of details to that. As you may have heard, I just released a sefer on Hafrashas Challah. So along the way, it just came out a day or two ago. So along the way, at many different spots, I speak about the shilas about this Tevel hafrashah system. The very last chapter is a summary of all those different pratim about it, about all the things that have to do with the Tevel system, which is it's so to speak modern way of doing things. It's not like anybody's bubby ever did that. So it's a relatively modern way to do things. And there's lots of questions about it. Okay, so I'll break up my thoughts about that into 3 groups. Okay, and the first has to do with things to do with time. And that is like this. And the first thing I'm going to mention is the most serious concern that there is with this Tevel system. And the Tevel system, as I mentioned, can be with matzah or with dough. Most people use matzah because it's really convenient. Because you get matzah that's made from Tevel. They go to a bakery, they make special matzah out of Tevel, and they put it into the place. Matzah doesn't spoil. Matzah just sits there. It's nice and small and just sits there in the bakery, and they do the hafrashah from it. Well, the problem is, the thing is you have to be Hafrashas Challah from each year from the grain that grew during that year. So now Tafshin Pei Aleph, if we want to be mafresh from dough that grew in Tafshin Pei Aleph, we have to be mafresh from other dough that grew in Tafshin Pei Aleph. So what happens is that actually right at this time of the year, the winter wheat is already in the market. The winter wheat that was planted during Tafshin Pei Aleph is already in the market. And soon, in the next few weeks, spring wheat from Tafshin Pei Aleph will also be coming to the market. So during the summertime, the bakeries are switching over from the dough, from the flour from Tafshin Pei to the flour from Tafshin Pei Aleph. It's right around now that the changeovers are happening from Tafshin Pei to Tafshin Pei Aleph. The people who eat only Yashin are aware of that because of the spring wheat. But the winter wheat happens a few weeks before that. So now there's a changeover going on. And what happens is that the Tevel matzah, for all kinds of logistic and practical reasons, the Tevel matzah probably won't get made till after Sukkot. So what that means is that there's going to be months when the bakery is using flour from Tafshin Pei Aleph, and the Tevel is from Tafshin Pei. So you can't be mafresh from Tafshin Pei onto Tafshin Pei Aleph. It just doesn't work. So it's a very serious concern. There are those who have tried to be melamed zchus as to why it should work, not terribly convincingly. It's why we at the CRC happen to prefer Tevel dough instead of Tevel matzah. And the advantage of Tevel dough is the Tevel dough is made at the bakery. You go to the bakery and you say to them, because of Hafrashas Challah, we need you to make us a dough for do Hafrashas Challah on. The bakery itself, a commercial bakery, will know when they start getting the new flour. It's important because the protein levels change each year, so most commercial bakeries know when they're getting in the flour from the new crop rather from the old crop, and then the mashgiach come and make sure they make a new batch of Tevel. So it's easier to control that we get from the right year because let's say he finds out that on July 10th is the first day they're going to be getting the new flour, so he comes in, puts in new, and it takes a few weeks as they slowly transition from the old to the new, and then over the time he puts in gets new Tevel dough, dough, until eventually he's only using new. He has old and new until he's only using only new. But the people who use the matzah, in fact, it makes it very problematic for a few months of the year when they don't have Tevel matzah from the right year.
If the bakery is not on Yashin, is that help to that at all?
If they're not on Yashin, will that help at all? They're not put on Yashin. So let's think how they could do that. If they're not put on Yashin because they only use old flour, they'll keep spring flour from the year beforehand. Yeah, if they use spring wheat from the year beforehand, that would help them. That's one way for them to be Yashin. I guess that would help them.
How long do they keep the matzah? Is it possible matzah from 3 years ago?
Well, no, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You probably wouldn't want to keep it from 3 years ago, but it wouldn't be a problem because the new matzah, let's say the new matzah is going to be made in October. So come October, you'll have it for next year. You have plenty of time to prepare before they start using next year's matzah to get it around. The problem is for the people who are they're already baking with the new flour. That has a problem. But there's another way to make for bakery to be all Yashin, and that is they could just use winter wheat. They could use winter wheat and add to it protein to it to make it act as if it's spring wheat. There's a different way for a bakery to be always Yashin. They use winter wheat, which is Yashin, and they just have to add in protein that's old, so to speak, old Yashin protein, and to make the winter wheat act like spring wheat, in which case they have the same problem. They're just using winter wheat, so they haven't solved it, they haven't done anything better. They have the same problem that we talked about. Okay, now another thing that's to do with time is that when the Mashgiach makes this announcement every morning. Every morning he makes an announcement and says, every batter that's made today, I want hafrashah to happen based on using the Tevel that's there. And he may make it every day or every couple days. He for sure won't make it on Shabbos. So it could be a couple of days when he doesn't make an announcement. And it's possible that flour will show up at the bakery after he makes that announcement. Okay, at 8 o'clock in the morning he makes a statement that everything's going to be if how it's being Hafrashas Challah. At 9 o'clock a truck pulls up and brings in flour. Then he did something on Davar Shalom. He went ahead and said, I want this to be chal on that thing which didn't exist yet. Okay, he was making a hafrashah for something that didn't even exist yet. It's questionable whether if and how that could work, whether the hafrashah could work. He could solve that problem, which is often what people do. They say I want hafrashah to happen every time the batter is made. And if I missed any, in the past, I wanted to do a hafrashah to work for that also. So this way on Monday morning, today's Wednesday. On Wednesday morning, he said, I want it to be for every batter. Flour showed up later, and it didn't work, his hafrashah that he made. But on Thursday morning, he says, I want it for everything made today, and anything that I might have missed in the past. So what was made on Wednesday is now being covered also. So that's a way to get around that part. Okay.
Why can't they stop it? Who is making on the past?
They can. So you can. It would help. There are other things that helps for as well to do it on the pass. But he'd still have to do it every. I don't want to say every day, but give or take every day, because if he doesn't do it all the time, stuff could get all eaten up before he did it. So he wants to catch it before it disappears. So if he waits 3-4 days, it's not going anyplace from a commercial bakery. There's still plenty of time. But yes, so if he always would say he wants to do it in the past, it has other advantages also. In fact, that's not what people do, but it does have advantages to it, to say, yes, I want to work for the past. Okay. Again? But in Chutzars, can you do it after you ate it? After you ate something, as long as there's something left over, you can do that. So it has to be something left over. So again, this is a commercial bakery.
You can't be young to the Shirayim with it's not from the same Isa. That's a good thing.
Can you say that again?
You said by the first method with the dough balls, so the issue of shiyarehah wasn't the issue of shiyarehah, and conceivably even if everything was eaten up, you could take off part of it.
Right.
And that would help. But over here it's worse because it's not the same dough. Is that enough?
Is it more of a chiv of shiyarehah nikarim, you're saying?
Yeah, in other words, you said that maybe it'll be eaten up. So somebody here was asking, what's the problem if it's eaten up? Okay?
Because of shiyarehah nikarim. If it's all gone, then you can't be matzah.
Matzah, you're not giving the whole Tevel matzah. So why aren't you like this?
Okay, so the answer is because shiyarehah nikarim means there has to be truma and chulin. Okay, so over here, you think, here, I have the tevel behind. No, because the hafrashah, maybe I should have been clear. When I say I'm making hafrashah from this tevel, the part that's left behind is not becoming chulin. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The matzah that I have, I'm not leaving any chulin behind. I'm saying this, some of it is tevel, and some of it is truma, and none of it is chulin. Only the stuff that they bake is chulin. So there has to be shiyarehah nikarim. There has to be something has to become chulin that I left behind. Okay, so that's the part that the bakery made.
Yeah, the problem is asking so you can fix that. Just don't make something of coolant. And then that would be an answer.
Okay, I guess that can happen. I'm not so worried about that. I'm not worried about shiyarehah nikarim. Think about it. It's a commercial bakery. They make thousands of pounds of food. Okay, so I show up a day or two later. It's not eaten up yet. I'm not worried that it's eaten up. It's out there. It's going to spend days and days before people eat it up. So. Okay.
So, Rabbi Cohen, his question is that even if it was all eaten up, why can't you do this once a week?
Do what?
Every other week.
Let do the hafrashah for the past, you're saying?
Correct. Is it a problem? Is it because the whole isa was eaten up and you haven't added any of the tevel dough to the isa? You're just going to be...
That's a good question. I have to think about that. I'm not sure. Can I say I want the chulin to be in this dough when that dough got completely up? Okay, that's a fair question. I'm not sure about that. Okay. Doing the hafrashah with matzah has a different issue with it, and that is that the people who bake this tevel matzah, there's a special someone's making this special, they're making tevel matzah special. They make that out of wheat. So that helps you if your bakery bakes things with wheat. If your bakery makes things with other grains, then you're not going to help you because no one's making spelt tevel matzahs. This is not that I'm aware of. There's no such thing that can do that. So the tevel dough again gives you that flexibility. You do what you want to. If this bakery works with oats, we'll make something with oats. When they spelt or place whatever grain they use, if they use one of the other grains besides for wheat, you have a flexibility to use that other grain. When you make your tevel dough. Okay. Now another Oh, okay. The another issue that there is that again, it's a commercial bakery.
Rabbi Cohen,
Yes.
Rabbi Syerson popped up a question here. I don't know if you see it.
What was the question?
He asked, the Gra says from the Tashbats, even in Chutz La'aretz, minig is to be mafresh before eating.
Okay.
There would be a reason not to be mafresh only once a week.
Okay, so that's fair. If there's such a sheet, if there's such a thing that you should, I don't remember about that. I have to look that back up. I remember passing that. I don't remember. It doesn't strike me to remember if that is or is not correct. But if there's such a sheet that you want that you should do before, okay, then fine. Then that's a reason to do it in advance. Again, if you did it every day for yesterday, you would still be before people eat it. And again, in a commercial bakery, things don't get eaten in 5 minutes. So if you did it every day, someone's idea, let's do it every 2 weeks, would run into this problem. If you do it every day, you'd be good. Okay, so the another issue that we have by doing things remotely is we have Tevel. The Tevel is either in matzah or dough form. This issue I'm about to tell you is worse for the dough than it is for the matzah, and that is that you're not going to have it be in a mukaf. Because dough for sure can't be in a mukaf. Because dough is going to spoil unless you stick it in a freezer. So it's got to be in a freezer. So put the dough in a freezer, it's not going to be mukaf to what the bakery is making. Even if you're using matzah, which matzah doesn't need to be, frozen, even so, it would be hard to make, it's close to impossible to make mina mukaf, especially when the girl learns what mina mukaf means. Once it's in a kli, it might have to be touching. It's like almost impossible for it to be able to make a mukaf. Again, think about it as a commercial operation. This is not, 3 yidden in the house who want to do it the right thing. It's almost impossible to make a mina mukaf. And essentially, if you use this kind of a system, the hafrashah can happen shleim in a mukaf. Now, in the chutz you're allowed to be mafresh shleim in a mukaf. You are allowed to be mafresh shleim in a mukaf, but that's only if you're mafresh minei ubei. If you're mafresh from a different batter, then it doesn't work. You're not allowed to do. It has the same thing as in Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to be mafresh shleim in a mukaf. So the matzah, the person who's doing the hafrashah is doing the hafrashah shleim in a mukaf. And so this is a judgment that we're better off doing hafrashah shleim in a mukaf than people eating tevel that didn't have a hafrashah at all. Okay, so it's a side issue of chatei b'shushis v'chaveri. You're asking me. I'm the person working for the CRC. You say, David, I want you every day to do this hafrashah shleim in a mukaf, so that Yankel on the outside can eat bread that's not tevel. That's his own little question, but in practice, it's going to be shleim in a mukaf. In pashtus, it's going to be shleim in a mukaf. Again. If you go into the bakery, then you're going to stick your hand into the bowl and take out a piece of dough. Of course, it's going to be in a mukaf. You're good. But the problem is you want to use this tevel. Tevel means I'm 1,000 miles away. So you factory have to keep the tevel someplace to make it min a mukaf, to make it work. It's not going to be mukaf. It's not going to be. It's going to be in a freezer someplace, or in a closet, or in a box. Who knows where it's going to be? It's not going to be min a mukaf.
Once you've been signed up on shalom and mukaf, if you decide to make that call, why do you have to have the box of matzahs from the bakery? Have it in your house in Chicago.
Okay, that's true. So the thinking, it's a very valid point. You could just sit them, they all sit in the CRC office, and they could do it from there. That's true.
And then you can eat your chulin.
It's what?
You take the matzah, you split it to half, or 3/4, you make one part of it, and then you shireh the nikarim, and you're eating the chulin. That's wrong. We had before.
Now, again, you made an assumption that we can make shiyarehah nikarim by in this matzah itself, which is not part of that dough. That could work. I wasn't sure if that works or not. But so I have a feeling that the thinking is, although the Gemara says, and there's a very long Gemara who says, I'm sure you've learned, he says that nobody got this din straight. I'm going to set you straight about what the din is, what min mukaf means. It's not clear that everybody agrees to that thing. Again, I'm not saying that there's others saying a different shot. But it's not. It may be that when we're doing this, to try to make it in a mukaf according to somebody else. Can I say? You know what I mean? That growth that says that, which is very oysterhalder, and he has riots to it. It's very strong. But he says the putting it into the bakery is sort of maybe it's min mukaf. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But it's a valid point. If we're not going to be min mukaf, do it my half. It makes it easier. Okay. The last thing about I do the hafrashah remotely, then the mashgiach who's doing it is not in contact with the owner of this dough. The mashgiach is far away. I'm at home, and he's 100 miles away from me. In fact, it's a factory. There might not even be an owner in the factory altogether. The owner might be in Puerto Rico. Okay, and the factory's over here. So now we run into questions of shelichus. I'm doing the hafrashah for him. I have to be his shliach and then do his hafrashah. And the shlichus has its own complications. Can I be a shliach? If he appoints me to be a shliach, well, that doesn't work for things that are going to come in the future. He appoints me today. Excuse me, what happens to stuff that shows up in 6 months or 5 years from now? When it was Loibol Olam. Kenzan I could do it with Zachem Adam. Maybe I could do Zachem Adam. But for this, we have a way to solve this problem, the problem of the Zachem, and that is that we tell the mashgiach he should take ownership of the Tevel. Either he buys the Tevel matzah, this year he buys in the Tevel matzah, or if they make Tevel dough, he says to the bakery, I want you to make this dough for me, and I want it to be mine. I want to take ownership of it, in which case, then it's for sure Zachem Adam that he can do it, because there's no problems that he's Zachem Me Adam, because he owns it. He owns the what's having the hafrashah is his own. So he would be doing it by he would do zachem to be a shliach and avoid the shayla that maybe the zachem not be allowed to do by his owning the dough or the tevel or the matzah materials. Okay.
Does it work better because you're a pile because he's paying you a shtacha fee and you're taking them out?
So that's a question. It's a question. There are those who say that being a pile lets you take the role of a automatically as a role of a shliach. Yes, there's such a shita. Yes. But it's easier to avoid that just by owning it, which is the natural thing anyhow. The natural thing is that he's going to own it anyhow. Just by the dough, when he says to the factory, I want you to make this dough for me so I can do a Hafrashas Challah, they're not taking it back, So him taking possession of it is a very simple thing for him to do anyhow. Okay.
Make a shliach for all future things about post the mix. It doesn't say make a shliach for future uses.
So if it's a person who we say, if I'm continuing to make you a shliach for this thing, then I can. So maybe we could work that out that he could do it like that. Okay. Now within the actual hafrashah itself, the actual hafrashah when you're doing it from far away, there's some pratim. Like for example, I'll have to say, if there's a blue laraka, then I want the hafrashah to happen after it's baked. Okay, because when you do it yourself, you just do it correctly. So he has to say, if it's a blue laraka, I want it to happen once it's baked afterwards. And in some people will say is, I want the hafrashah to happen half an hour after the dough is made. They say that because in case the Baal Bas or someone's there wants to actually do the hafrashah himself and have the mitzvah, he should be able to do the mitzvah. So if I want it to be chal later, and there's a lot to say. The wording, once you work out all these details, and you have to be mitzayim the mukaf, so you have to say where it is, and where in the dough it is, and there's all kinds of things to say. So that's a whole thing that he has to say, a whole long thing that he has to say. And you run into the shayla, can the person get up and just say, I want to do that hafrashah like it says on my paper. Okay, can I just get away with that rather than speaking out the whole thing? Or if I'm the person who takes care of bakeries, and the CRC is hashgacha on 20 bakeries, I have to list of all their names also. So can I just say whatever it says on my paper, whatever it is, and then go back to sleep, or do I have to actually read out the whole thing? Okay, that's a shayla not random. There's also a question when I do the hafrashah, can I make a bracha? Okay, so here, if I say it for the past, I can for sure make a bracha. If I say it for the future, it's a question whether you're allowed to make a bracha. There's a Magen Avraham who implies that if I'm saying something, I'm doing the mitzvah, I'm doing the matzah now, which will be chal in the future, you can't make a bracha on that. You can't make the bracha. You can only make the bracha if you make it for the past, which we talked about before. If you say it for the past, that's good. If you say it for the future, then there's rise that you can't make the bracha at that time, which is okay. A lot of the people who do this don't like making the bracha anyhow. They're like, listen, this is all fuzzy, this whole thing that's going on. I'm not sure I want to make a bracha. But once you get past that part of it, there's a different angle, which is you can't make a bracha for the future. Okay. Okay. Then last is in the very first siman, the Ramah speaks about that you should do hafrashah of a kazayas, and that you should burn the chal when you finish with it, And neither of those are going to happen over here. Okay, the hafrashah is for sure not going to be a kazayas. No way the hafrashah is going to be a kazayas, because if you had to make a kazayas, you have to make a truckload full of tevel. You know what I mean? That wouldn't work. So they do tiny little pieces that they do for hafrashah. And in most cases, they don't end up burning it either. Hopefully, they don't eat it, but burning it is not so mistarved. That's what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm finished with this part that I have to say about the Tevel system. As I mentioned, there's all kinds of potential issues with it. It's not the greatest, but it's in practice, it's what people are doing. Again, if you want to give hashgacha on a bakery and not have a mashgiach have to show up every day, or it's not even physically possible to show up every day, then that's what they do. They do some kind of Tevel. Or some people say, I don't like this Tevel system, and they do the other idea, which they sell to a guy, which has its own complications, as you can imagine. Sell to a guy has its own issues. That's what's done. Okay. Go ahead. You gotta move up. You gotta move. Before, and I started coming closer to the computer, but I realized that it's not. I don't get any better if I sit close to the computer. You know, so.
It's the fact that they're not allowed to desire. Is that just? Is there any muffin for that? Let's say someone would have an old practice and not desire.
So I have to tell you that really it's very not clear what the makar is saying for this minute to do because eyes altogether. It's not so clear at all. You'll wait till you see in the sefer. Maybe why it should be like that. The Rambam brings such a minute, and my house says everybody. You take a little piece off, and the piece is always a kazayis. Of course, maybe you don't eat that much matzah on Pesach, but that's a kazayis. But so you're not doing it. You want to do it properly. You know what I mean? I mean, the din is really you give kisayra. You don't have to give minhag. You don't give anything. What we give, the amount they give off is more than a sayra. But a kazayis.
The issue of mukaf is a much bigger issue than the kazayis.
Yes, because mukaf is a din, and kazayis is okay. But wait a second. But mukaf is only lechatchila. Mukaf is lechatchila. But mishana chaverta doesn't work at all. Totally doesn't work. So that's the most serious issue. And you know, so yeah.
How do you calculate sa'ir per
So what they'll do is they'll say I'm being marfish. They're going to pick an amount. They'll say a gram or a half a gram or an amount. So they weigh the thing. A box of matzahs weighs 454 grams. Or if they make dough, then they weigh the dough and they say, okay, this dough has enough for this many 500 lishas. And each time they say, I'm doing 1 gram. Let's say they pick the number 1 gram, and there's 500 grams in it. So it's enough for 500 lishas. So they have an idea in the commercial bakery. They don't know exactly, but give or take, let's say every day they make 20 lishas. So I know 20 lishas. I have this. You figure, calculate how many days I have now with 500 grams.
Somebody's asking,
Why is it not a problem?
Go ahead.
Why is it not a problem, the fact that the dough in the freezer is totally frozen? Like, does that take away from its dough status?
So it's a fair question. It actually, there are riots that maybe, I don't think there's a particular problem with it being frozen. I don't think particularly that makes a difference for the hafrashah, because it's still tevel. There are those who say that you can't be mafresh from raw unbaked. Okay, that's a different problem. Here, we're doing, depending on when you do the hafrashah, if I do from tevel dough on dough, then that's raw on raw. If I do dough on baked, like I do for yesterday's stuff, there are those who don't hold to that. Or the other way around, if I use tevel matzah and I do that on the dough, that's baked on raw. And Shmir Shabbos says that that's okay, even to do that. To bake, baked and raw doesn't make a difference if they're interchanged. But from frozen, I'm not familiar that there's a problem. That's not frozen. Tevel's tevel, So.
as far as 1 year from the Kodesh and the Rosh and the Kodesh, whatever, how do you calculate the years? The year is the same year as the Pesach from the Omer?
No, from Rosh Hashanah. The year goes by the so to speak, the calendar year, by Rosh Hashanah. It's Ketzira, but in practice, it makes no difference if it's Ketzira or it happens to be by Ketzira, but it makes a difference because in America at least, we plant winter wheat after Rosh Hashanah and spring wheat like Purim time, and they both get harvested. The winter wheat gets harvested like June time, like maybe Shavuos, and spring wheat like Tisha B'av. So they all happen in the same year. That's I'm saying in the United States at least.
So, what does
In the commercial bakeries, we use Tevel dough. We will have them prepare dough. Either we ask the bakery itself to prepare it, or we ask one of our local retail bakeries to prepare it for us, whichever way. And we bring it there and we put it out there. We put it into the freezer there. Using the meaning that they have. Usually it's wheat, but if they have other, again, they could have spelt and rye and the other meaning, then we'll make it with that also. And then we do that hafrashah remotely like that. That's what we do.
But another point that the scroll cave we deal with is that when you want to set aside a tevel, you have to make sure that the hafrashah that was said shouldn't go on the tevel, otherwise it will automatically be pater. So a day before, before it's made into a dough, so sometimes that can be a couple of hours before you go to the bakery to get your tevel, you have to release that tevel and say, look, my amira should not be foul in this dough, and that will allow you to get tevel.
Yes, that's true. And I'll mention two other points that have to do with that. And one is that if you use tevel matzah, then think about what happened. Somebody baked, let's say, 500 pounds of tevel matzah, and he distributed it. He didn't make it all for the CRC. He distributed it to 20 hashgachas. They all have tevel matzah. Okay? If one guy out there messes up, and he is mafresh on the dough, on the batter itself, he just ruined it for everybody. Okay? There's one guy in Yerubitzville, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's mafresh it. Or he does like what you said, I want to make shiyarehah nikarim, so I'll say this is tevel, and the rest is going to be chulin. Well, guess what? The whole rest of the United States just got messed up. The whole rest of them are all eating tevel now because some guy, in his basement doesn't know what he's doing, and he needed for shelichus. He needed lechem for shelichus. So he decided to be mafresh. Now we're all messed up. Okay, so that's a problem. You do tevel dough, you just got to deal with yourself. You got to make sure your mashgiach knows what he's doing, but you don't have to worry about every meshukana who makes a mistake. That's one thing. The second thing.
You gotta make that follow before it gets to you.
If somebody makes it challah, if someone says, I'm doing hafrashah for this batter, he just made all batter. It was 500 pounds worth that they made. I forget how much they made. He was just mafresh for the whole thing,
Again, you're talking about the person that strikes?
No, I'm not talking about a person at the bakery. I'm talking about someone 3 months later. He's sitting in, I don't know where. He's up in the mountains in Denver, and he's up there, and he says, I have tevel dough, and I want to eat it today. And I'm Hafrashas Challah, or I'm in a bakery. Yeah, he doesn't remember the nusach. He says, yeah, this should be challah. This should be challah.
So. If I want to be mizaka, if it's often the adam, and I take challah off, and I have in mind the pater, all the tevel doughs that the CRC has, I can mess you up?
No. You wouldn't be messing. Oh, I'm not talking if you could take my tevel and ruin it. But when we have tevel matzah, it's all made together. So when I do hafrashah, I have the right to be mafresh for this tevel. Once I'm mafresh for this tevel, it's a hafrashah. Done. It's not tevel now. It's chulin. It's not like just being mafresh for the stuff in my house. Maybe you can't get the stuff in my house. I won't let you. But the stuff that's in here, you have no choice. You know what I mean? It's all together. Okay. No, I'm not saying because of the mukaf. I'm not saying because of the mukaf. I'm not coming for that. The mukaf himself says again, I don't hold like this. No such thing. I'm saying.
Because he has fast and it's going on the whole batch.
Let's say the guy says that. Okay, well he doesn't know what he's doing. He says, I'm being Hafrashas Challah. It's automatic. You have to.
I want to eat this matzah shelichus, so it should go on this matzah. That's not going to ruin anything. The rest of the batch is not fast.
Right, but he's not such a London. The guy just said is, I want to eat this. I'm being Hafrashas Challah. Okay, so you just I'm being Hafrashas Challah. So Hafrashas Challah works. If you don't say something special, it works for everything. Okay, so now the second thing is it's worth.
Why does that work? Why does it work for everybody's stuff? Let's say we have a dough together. I make a dough together with you, and we split it up. And you get yours, I get mine. If I take challah on mine,
that's chulin. So it's chulin. I separated the challah. Now it's chulin. No, I don't think so. Okay. The second point I wanted to make is that if you're the person who bakes tevel matzah, if you do that, then you should realize that the kalim that you just made, the kalim that you baked on, are treif. You just baked tevel in your oven. So your oven is now treif. So you have a problem now because you can't bake other things in that oven. So what you have to do is you have to do a hafrashah on the blias that are in there. You can do a hafrashah for them. That's its own question, but you're going to do a hafrashah for them. When you do that hafrashah, what?
That's always how matzah is done.
I know that. But in this case, you have to make that hafrashah without letting it dechal on everything else. You make a hafrashah just on the bliyah, not on the tevel matzah that went out to the hashgacha. Because if you do it on those other matzahs, you ruined it for them. So you got this very specialized little hafrashah over here, which is saying, there's bliyahs in here that I have to do a hafrashah for. Fine, you always do. When you do a hafrashah, it counts for the bliyahs also because that's part of the batch. But here I'm saying I want a hafrashah happen for that part that's in there, but not for the part that went that way. So that's its own little sensitivity. That's not for every guy. That's the person does the baking. Okay? For example, let's say you're going to say to me, David, I have an idea. It takes me till October till I get the new Tevel matzah. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to make my own little crackers at some place. You're going to make it in my house. I'm going to make crackers to distribute to all the people we give hashgacha to so we can have Tevel matzah, so to speak, Tevel crackers for the next few months from the new dough. You could do that. But you have to make sure you do a hafrashah on the blades that you had, because or else tomorrow when you make a piece of fish for yourself to eat, you're going to be eating without blades of Tevel in it. Well, that's just something to keep in mind.
These companies that make the Tevel matzah, the special run just with Tevel?
Yes. Yes. Well, in fact, not only is it a special run for Tevel, but actually you need to have a yid own it. Okay, so right now, I don't believe that there's a bakery in the United States that's owned by Jewish people. So it needs a yid to own it. It's not only a special run because they're doing Tevel, it's like a whole to-do to make the Tevel, but you have to have a yid own the flour, or else we really wasted our time. If the yid doesn't own the flour, right? What are we doing? It's not Tevel. So we have to actually make it special arrangements that a yid should own that flour when they do it. On some matzah, on some boxes of matzah, it says the laws of Chal are followed. Okay? Now, the laws of Chal are followed sometimes means we're owned by non-Jews, so we don't have to be Hafrashas Challah, which is one of the laws of Challah. It's at the end of the Simanim. It says if a guy owns, you don't have to be Hafrashas Challah. That's what they mean. They don't say Challah vet Genomen because they say the Challah vet Genomen that wouldn't be true because sometimes the Challah is not Genomen. But it just says the laws of Challah are followed. One of those laws is that if a guy owns a thing, I say, okay, that's
Can I pull back a second? I just want to add.
Come a little closer. Come a little closer.
I want to just pull back a quick question. If I want to make a bracha in this circumstance, so I have to be, my nusach of my hafrashah has to be also on the day before. That's what we were timing before. Why is that not a suffix bracha? Because you don't know, maybe they got the shipment on time, and my hafrashah yesterday was.
You're 100%. You're 100%. If every day I say I want hafrashah to be for the future and for the past, then I didn't save myself. I may not be able to make the bracha. If I want to avoid that problem, I would only make hafrashas in the past. I will never make hafrashas for the future. Every day I'll say, this hafrashas is for whatever they baked yesterday. So if yesterday was Sunday, there was no baking, then I wouldn't want to do that. But I make sure, I always say it when I know something happened in the past, which is most days, unless it was yesterday was July 4th, I'm saying I know that I'm covered. But I'm saying for the past, then I know I'm only saying the past. I should have made that clear. Again? So it's a shayla, if you could do hafrashah. This is a shayla from Pidyon Haben, a shayla, but whether you could do something that would be chal on Shabbos. Okay, I didn't mention that issue. That's an issue which is, if on Friday the person says, for every batch that they make, I want hafrashah to be chal, that means on Shabbos morning they're going to make bread and he's doing hafrashas challah. Okay, that's quite a shayla, whether you're allowed to do that. You're making a chalus happen, a kinyan is going to happen on Shabbos. That's a question. So I didn't mention that. It's in my notes. I didn't mention that. That's a different shayla. The timing of it, because it's going to happen on Shabbos. What the nusach they say is, from now until the next time I say this, I want there to be hafrashah for each batch. So that's a problem. That's another reason to say in the past. Another reason to not say future, but say past. Yeah.
It's not always so applicable if the business is owned by a yid. It would be a reason to make a mechira Shabbos as well.
Okay. No. Wait. You're thinking retail bakery. This is a commercial bakery. Okay. This is a commercial bakery. So if the owner of the bakery is Shomer Shabbos and he cares about not having the bakery open on Shabbos, he'll do something to make the mechira for Shabbos. Whether he chooses to do that is his own personal religious preference. What he does about that. That doesn't affect the Kashrus of the bread. We wouldn't be involved in that. In most cases, the person who happens to be Jewish could not care less about whether he's Mechal Shabbos. That, unfortunately, but that doesn't affect our food, so we don't pay attention to it. It's not relevant to me whether the bakery that's in Nebraska is whether that person is being Shomer Shabbos. If he wants to be and he talks to us, we can help him. We really send him to our business. If it doesn't help him, then he shouldn't be only on Shabbos. But most of the cases, that's not our issue. If he's a Yid, we have to do Hafrashas Challah. But whether he's Shomer Shabbos in his personal life, is we care, but we don't insist on that. We don't take that as part of our job. Okay, any other questions? I have like another 5 minutes. So if you want, I can look at the list. Or how about if you look at the list and fill out one or two that seem most relevant?
Bakeries that make separate pans or separate pieces of cooking your home passions, cakes and pans. Are you not in that case?
If you make a blil raka?
In separate pans.
So most individuals, like if you ask most people, do you have to mafresh challah from blil raka? They tell you, no, of course they have mafresh from blil raka. Because they never, in their house, they never saw their mother mafresh from blil raka. Because it's very hard to get a shir challah from blil raka. Okay? In a home setting, most housewives never make enough blil raka to be mafresh challah. It's not so realistic. If commercially, or even like in the yeshiva kitchen, you may have that. But the reason why they would have it, even if it's made in pans, is because there's going to be a tzir of sal afterwards. Or there's a chashash of a tzir of sal afterwards. Meaning, let's say they make pancakes. So every how many guys, a zillion pancakes before you have a shear. But there's open the possibility of a tzir of sal afterwards, because after they make pancakes, the pancakes get stacked up someplace, and they potentially for a tzir of sal. And the same thing for a sheet cake also. The sheet cake, each sheet by itself may or may not have a shir challah, depending on how big they make it. But there's a good potential for tzir of sal, and if there's a possibility of a tzir of sal, then you make hafrashah.
Bakery racks and salt?
What about the bakery racks?
That kind of salt?
That counts as a sal. If it has walls, usually they don't have walls. If it has walls, they don't count as a sal. If they're on a sheet pan, then that might ruin. That's a shalom not running, but that ruins the sal. Maybe if each one is in its own individual pan, does that take it out of the bigger sal that, so to speak, that there is? The racks, I don't think usually have walls to them to make the sal.
CRC, actually for cookies, recently they came out with edible cookie dough.
Okay.
Made to be eaten with.
So what's the question?
This is not for Scotland. Is a snack.
So if it's made by a Yid, you're talking about. If that company's owned by a Jewish person, then why should we not be mafresh challah? What's your thinking that we should not be mafresh?
I thought it was something called past tense.
That what?
The quality that you don't bake it, you just mix together grain and honey and oil. That's not trying to tell because you're not trying to bake it.
Because you're not going to bake it. Okay? So you're saying, since I'm not going to bake it, I'm going to eat it. The plan is to eat it as is. Maybe it's not kind of, you might be right. Okay, think about that.
Maybe some of it they separate the stuff. One with batch, some with cooking stuff.
So for sure, if some of it's going to be baked, then for sure you have challah. So the question is, what happens if it's for sure not going to be baked? Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you don't have to be mafresh challah. Maybe that's a...
Maybe also it's amanat b'chalik batzik la'acheirim.
No, it's not. It doesn't count for amanat b'chalik because one of those people might buy a lot of it together. It's only considered amanat b'chalik if you're sure that the people are not going to make a tziruf later on. So like if I have a camp and every kid takes on one cupcake, there's no way there's going to be a tziruf because each kid takes their own cupcake. But if I sell commercially and I sell packages of cookies, so how do I know the person's not going to make a big display of cookies and do it here to be mechag later on? That's
But then the chiyuv is on the lekeach, not on the meiser.
No, it's not true. If I make a shir challah, I can only say it's amanat challah if I know it will not come. There's no way it'll come together as a tziruf later on. If it's possible to become as a tziruf later on, then I'm the chiyuv is b'shas lisha. If I know it'll never come back together, then I'll say it's amanat challah, and it can be amanat challah batzik, then it's going to be mutter. But otherwise, it's my chiyuv. I made the dough. I'm going to make it. If there's a possibility, and in the dough, in this case, of course, there's a possibility. But somebody might buy 2 boxes and put them together. You know. So.
So the other side of the whole wheat flour that goes with the shear, you separate the morsel and the chaff and other stuff before or after. You know, currently in the flour, the way they do the whole wheat flour, do they have this separated before and then afterwards?
Okay, so if we run out of time, it's its own special shear, a whole shear, to explain to you why I don't think it makes a difference. I know the Shulchan Aruch says that. I'm well within mukaf says like that. I think that it doesn't make a difference. I think so. What?
You go based on my bag of whole wheat flour, you just go with the regular.
The regular shear. The shear is a little bit different because I think whole wheat flour is a little lighter. Fractionally, it's a drop different. But as far as the fact that they took out the bran out of it, I don't think it makes a difference. So either I'll have to come back to you, talk to you after Tisha B'Av about it, or you'll have to read about it in your favorite Sefer Hafrashas Challah.
I have one more question on the this. It seems that the portion implies that the volume of grain increases when it's after it's ground. And we wanted to know how, if that is so, how that's so, and we had a bad hypothesis that it's because you increase the surface area when you increase the surface area exponentially when you break it up. That was one thought we had. We just wanted to know how it's shy of that it could be a bigger volume when you ground it up and then it's smaller granules.
Okay, I don't remember seeing such a thing. I believe you, that it says it gets bigger when you grind it up. I believe you. But, I mean, it has to do with how fluffy the thing becomes. You know, when you grind it up, presumably there's a certain amount of air gets stuck in there and it gets fluffier. Logic would tell you that you get more compressed because the pieces are easier to get next to each other. But I guess there's air in between them and it fluffs it up a certain amount. I don't know. I'm not sure. Not really sure.
I've seen in some places they say that you shouldn't trust when you're measuring a shiyarehah, you shouldn't trust cups, volume. You should rather only use weight. That's the most of the trio because it's not as
That's the opposite. The shear is volume. Of course, the shear is volume. The weight is it's convenient for people to do it in weight, so we convert it to weight. But of course, the shear is in volume. Of course.
I think they were saying because maybe more or this. I don't know. We didn't understand where the limits was coming from.
Okay. Of course, the shear is in volume. It's convenient. The Rambam tells you it's 520 grams. And okay, so that's convenient for you. You want to know if you have a gram scale. You want to know how much it is. So you know your shear challah. But that's convenient for people. But no, of course not. The shear is of course in volume. Of course. What? What about it? Chayim challah. I don't know if you grind it together and it gets into it, makes itself into a dough. I would think that's chayim challah. Okay, guys. It was good speaking to everybody here. Hatzlacha.